I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Spandrew Spice.
Welcome to Deep Cuts, the podcast where we pick a topic and walk you through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty so you can appear like an interesting and idiosyncratic person at your next forced social function. Today's topic is...
Lou Pearlman.
Who was Lou Pearlman? Well, he was the manager behind some of the biggest boy bands of the 90s and 2000s, including the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. However, following the post-boy band boom, he was outed for screwing over many of the artists he worked with out of hard-earned money before getting arrested for one of the largest Ponzi schemes in American history.
Act 1. Quit playing games with my blimps. Louis J. Pearlman was born on June 19th, 1954 in Queens, New York. His father, Hy Pearlman, ran a dry cleaning business, while his mother, Renee, was a school lunchroom aide. But his notable familial relation would be with Art Garfunkel, his first cousin who was 13 years older than him. It's reported that Garfunkel's success in the music industry would inspire Pearlman to eventually follow a similar path. Of course, even having a famous cousin isn't enough to break into the music biz. He met up with Bob Curiano in 1973 to try to be the next Simon & Garfunkel. When he met Curiano on stage after a performance, he opened by saying how he was Art Garfunkel's cousin. But Curiano would later say that Pearlman was only ever interested in music as a hobby, so their partnership didn't really go anywhere. It also didn't help that Pearlman wasn't exactly musically gifted. There's a couple of things that are really funny about this to me. Number one, how funny is it that his cousin is Art Garfunkel? And so whenever he went to want to have a music career or try to do something in music, he was just like, I'm gonna do a Simon and Garfunkel. He wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna play music. He was like, I gotta do a duo with another person where we use our last names. Because my cousin did that. It's like a family craft.
Yeah, I always wonder about that in terms of creative people who follow in the footsteps of other family members, whether it's artists or musicians or movie directors or whatever, where I don't know, I would find it very difficult to want to do the same thing that a family member did. You know, like David Cronenberg's son makes movies and they're really good. I like his movies a lot, but they're like Xerox David Cronenberg movies, kinda. You know what I mean? Like you squint and you're like, oh, it's kind of like a Cronenberg movie. And then it says a Cronenberg film and you're like, oh yeah, of course. Like part of me is like, is that a genetic predilection towards similar interests?
His son is, of course, Sean Levy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You know, Brandon Cronenberg. But is that a genetic predilection towards similar interests? Is that this person is around you all the time, so you're kind of absorbing their interests and quirks from a young age, and you can't help but not be similar to them as a creative person? How does that, I'm fascinated by that.
I think it's probably something more similar to that. I think a lot of people would say that it's just like, oh, they're fucking, their family are like these powerful people, these rich people, and then they just have an in to do this thing, and it's just an easy in to be able to be famous or be rich or whatever, which probably is true in some or many cases. You hear Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell, and you're just like, this dude... He was just like, let me in, daddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I'm in the shower, I'm afraid to wash my hair.
May I please have some money?
My thinking is that more often than not, the reason is something to do with nurture of you grow up and your mom or your dad is this thing and they're very skilled at it, or it's perceived that they are, and you admire them and you admire what they do and you grow a respect for that craft and that thing that they do. And also somewhere in the gumbo of that is I have an in to do this, but probably more than people want to admit, it's just I've grown up and I genuinely have a passion for this because you want to be like people you admire and make your parents proud of you and things like that.
Yeah, it's just, I guess as maybe this is, I'm just more of a contrarian or something, or maybe because I have grown up outside of the confines of that dynamic, maybe I have an inflated sense of self, and maybe if I was in that dynamic as a younger person, it would be completely different. But there's a component of that I think is understandable. Like, I love David Cronenberg's movies. If I was in David Cronenberg's orbit, I'm sure I would make not quite as good David Cronenberg movies too. But if I was in Elliott Smith's, like if Elliott Smith was my dad, I would not be making singer-songwriter music. You know what I mean?
You'd stab yourself in the chest with a steak knife, and then people would forever speculate that your girlfriend was the one that did it.
Yeah, and I would misspell my name, leading credence to some of those rumors. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's some aspects of this that are understandable.
But once again, you can't imagine what it would be like to have grown up as the son of Elliott Smith, and because part of like growing to love something or growing to respect something is kind of like being in the culture of it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Like,
sometimes you see something from the outside, you're just like, and then you like, when you are introduced to the inner workings of it, you're like, holy shit. Like, this is to a lesser degree, but I never had any interest in professional wrestling my entire life. My brother liked pro wrestling when I was a kid. He watched mostly WCW, and I just had no interest in it at all. And then I went to a Lucha Underground show with my friend Joey Clift. The show.
Is this before we knew each other? Or
yeah.
Do we know it?
Yeah. We talked about this before. It may have been when you were working on it. We talked about this before, but when the show that you used to work on, I went to a Lucha Underground show with Joey Clift in Boyle Heights, and I was just like, oh, I get it. I get why this works. And I still don't really. I'm not like a fan really, but like I gained an understanding and a respect for it, and it like clicked where I was like, oh, I see why all the 30-year-old dudes that I'm around are obsessed with this bullshit. And it's even, I can only imagine that, but like, growing up in that culture directly with your parent as like a figurehead in it. And it's probably the reason why, to bring up pro wrestling, why there's a lineage of so many like father, son, grandson pro wrestler legacies like that.
I think there's also something to be said too of the kind of like, you as a young person, you're trying to use any angle that you have to get a break, and so you're just trying and trying and trying, and you're like, fuck, I know I have something to say if I could just kind of get my one shot, right? And some people, I think, use this in a craven way. They use whatever the interwoven tapestry of connections that they have are, some of which are related to family, some of which aren't, and some of them are just kind of like weird half measures where you don't think that you're making a concession, but you're just like, oh, well, if I just tweak my personality or the thing I make or my craft or whatever 4% to the left, 4% more to the left, 4% more to the left, 4% more to the left, you find yourself getting more of a positive feedback, and then you wake up one day and you're Rey Mysterio Jr. or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and everybody does that, to a certain extent. Like, 11, 12 years ago, I would have never in a fucking million years imagined myself working in social media. Like, I didn't even use social media. I had no interest in it. I had like a music MySpace. Yeah, that was it. Like, I just had no interest in being on social media. It wasn't my thing. And then you get a job that's like a writing job, but it's social media related. And then you're like, oh, and then if I lean into it a little bit this way, then I'll get a better job. And if I lean into it a little bit more this way, I'll get more money. And then eventually I have a whole fucking career, and I would consider myself an expert on this thing that I, in reality, don't have any interest in whatsoever.
Yeah, but I think that there's a version of that is like existentially tormenting, and then there's a version of it that's benign, right? And like, I don't want to speak for you and say whether yours is one or the other, but I can see how if you were a young musician and you're like, I just want to make money making music, I don't care what type of music, because maybe you're not somebody that has a real authorial voice, but you want the attention of being on the stage, you love the process of making and writing music, and so you're just like, whatever it fucking takes. And I there's a part of me that respects the whatever it fucking takes. And then there's another part of me that's like, yeah, but where's your authorial fucking voice? You know, like, who gives a shit if you're on the stage if what you're saying isn't important?
And honestly, I find it hard to even do things like that. Like I'm so like feast or famine when it comes to things that if I'm interested in something, I will put every fucking fiber of my being into doing it. And if I'm not interested in it, I just can't do it. Which is the reason why I was able to sort of get into social media, because the turning point for me was when I realized that social media was about like manipulating human psyche, and that was very fascinating to me. Growing up for Pearlman was tough because, well, he was a total dork. Reports state how he'd go to school with his pants hiked up real high and always had a pocket protector on him, which that detail was very funny to me because like the pencil pocket protector is like exclusively, at least in my mind, like a trope of a nerd from like movies and TV shows and books and things like that. That is like, it's like a simulacrum. It's like a shadow of a ghost where like at some point pencil pocket protectors were a thing. And then people started making fun of people for having them and correlating it with being a nerd, and then that worked itself into pop culture, and then people started like using that as a trope to the point where like I've literally never seen a pencil pocket protector. In my mind, that's like just a thing in movies. I didn't even know it was a real thing because it was probably something that people did in like the 50s or something. So it's really funny that he just actually wore a pencil pocket protector because I've never heard of that in real life. It's exclusively something from like cartoons to me.
Yeah, I just know it from the tropes of media as well.
Alan Gross described Pearlman as
a very shy kid, didn't have many friends, wasn't very friendly, a little overweight. He wasn't comfortable with who he was, you know? I'm 3 years older, but we were the only children in the building, so we kind of became friends.
But it wasn't just that Pearlman was an outcast. He was also a liar. Many of his childhood friends have noted since his rise to fame how they never really knew if he was telling the truth. While being cousins with Art Garfunkel might seem to be one of those lies, that was, in fact, true, with Art Garfunkel even performing at Pearlman's bar mitzvah. Perhaps the Garfunkel connection made some of his more outlandish lies seem plausible. I know the answer. I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but like, have you ever know a guy like that? Like one of those guys? There's like a guy like that who's just like, he just lies about everything. And
yeah, I think I might have even told this story on the show before, but like my freshman year of high school, there was a guy who, his name was Aaron, and he claimed that he ran an auto body shop.
Yeah, you have told me this. I think you might have told me on the show. He said he ran an auto body shop, and I forget the end of the story, but you've definitely told me this.
I mean, there's no crazy end to it. I just believed him because I was like, that's something that's so stupid. Like, why would you lie about it? And I feel like my sister or maybe one of our other friends was just like, no, dude, he doesn't fucking run an auto body shop. He's like a 17-year-old. And I'm like, I don't know. Are you sure? He could.
Yeah, I've definitely known many dudes like that. It's a type of guy. And definitely when I was a kid, I knew kids like that. The most recent one that I knew is somebody that you also kind of know. I won't name them or whatever, but the most recent like dude that just lies about everything to the point where you're just like, you just don't believe a single word that they say. And they're constantly just telling like outlandish stories and then always trying to one up everybody in a conversation is somebody that I've known recently, somebody I worked with at some point.
I know who it is.
Yeah.
I know who it is.
And he would basically, and it's also funny because I always like other people don't seem to realize it. Like I'll be like around this person and they're telling these stories and everybody else seems to believe them. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, obviously lying. Like these stories are not true. But this was a dude, and some listeners will also know because some friends of the show have also met him. But like one time, a friend of the show, Brandon, he's a listener. He also drew the Mystery Treehouse comic, and he's done some other stuff for the show. One time he was visiting me at my office, and this was a guy I worked with, and Brandon draws comics, and he came in and I introduced him to the group, and this guy was like, oh yeah, my cousin sold a comic to Dark Horse. And he was like, oh really? He's like, how did he do that? He's like, yeah, he just like drew the comic and mailed it in and they published it. And he's like, oh, what's the comic? And he's like, oh, I don't remember. And I'm just like, this is a fucking lie. That's not how it works. And also, like, the people who make these lies up, like, their lies are always so obviously untrue if you know anything about the thing, because they usually don't know anything about the things that they're talking about. So they'll just have obvious ignorance of a process, and they'll just say something, and you're just like, that's not how it works. You don't just like mail a comic into a comic company and then they publish it. Like, they won't even read it.
I feel like that happened once with me there. I don't remember why we were around this person, but they said something to me, and I remember initially being like, oh yeah, I like this guy. This person's nice. Cool. All right.
He's a very charming guy, but he's a fucking liar.
And then he said this specific thing to me, and I was like, I don't think that's true. But I didn't say anything. And then like 30 seconds later, he said something else that was obviously not true. And I remember looking at you, and this is before we had this conversation where you had told me that this person habitually lied. And you kind of like, without saying anything, your eyes just said,
yes. Yeah, don't just like do what you want to do and then just like call this person out, because it'll just get really awkward, because they are definitely lying and I know it.
Yeah. It was very like opening of Pulp Fiction of be cool, honey bunny, be cool. Where I was just like, no, I have to fucking like, this guy's fucking, and you were just like, be cool, honey bunny, be cool. Fucking be cool, honey bunny, be cool. And I was like, no. But we were having this whole conversation with just our eyes.
Yeah,
there wasn't actual
our eyes. Yeah. Yeah. He told me that he was a soccer coach, and he was James Mangold's son's soccer coach. And one day they were out at practice, and his son like was acting up, and this guy like snapped him to attention, was like, hey, stop doing that, settle down, blah 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 blah, and like the kid just like snapped to attention and started behaving. And then James Mangold, the director James Mangold, walked up to him and was like, how did you get my son to behave like that? And he's just like, oh, it's easy, I just did that. And he's like, can I pay you to like be my son's tutor? He told me that he worked as an assistant for Quincy Jones one time, and he was at Quincy Jones's studio, and Quincy Jones took him into a room and showed him that they had a camera in the women's bathroom. He told me this. He told me this. Not that that's outlandish, like Chuck Berry did that, but like that's a fuck. And that's the other thing is like he has a story for everything. Like he said, like anytime you mention any celebrity, he'll like, one time I said somebody and he's like, oh yeah, I have the same dentist as him. Like every celebrity you can name, he somehow has a story that he knows that person in some way. And it's like in the sum of the parts, it's just like all of these things can't happen to one person. Like
no, you're Spandrew. He's the Tom Hanks in the movie where he knows everybody and runs across the country.
Forrest Gump. Yeah, he's the Forrest Gump of.
Yeah, he's the Forrest Gump of our time.
Yeah. But yeah. I'm sure everybody at home knows a guy like this. A few of you, like Brandon, know this specific guy, but they're always very fascinating to me because you wonder what the motivations are. Like I like lying, I guess. Like I like that. I think that's what storytelling is to a certain degree. Like you're just coming up with fictional worlds and stories, and that's that. I think when you're younger, sometimes you exercise that creativity in the form of lies. Like I remember I would tell my mom like weird made up stories because I just wanted to see if she would believe them, and I think that was me just kind of like pushing at the boundaries of creativity. But it feels like that these people, it's coming from a different place. And I'm always fascinated by it. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, why do you want us all to know that you have some tangential relationship with every celebrity that is alive?
Because life is a meaningless black pit of emptiness and despair. And maybe if I'm tangentially linked to someone that millions of people love, one human being out there will love me.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Despite being related to Despite being related to Garfunkel, breaking into the music biz was just too hard for Pearlman, so he turned his attention to another passion: Blimps.
Just what everyone listening to this episode is like, yeah, I watched that YouTube documentary that Lance Bass made. They didn't have blimps in that bitch.
We're getting into the good stuff, Dave, because we're getting into. Did you know that the guy who created NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys was a fucking blimp guy?
He was a blimpist, bro. He was a blimpist.
We're getting into the choppy waters here, or I guess the choppy skies. It only gets funnier from here, Dave. I almost texted you about this, and I was just like, no, I want him to just experience this on the show.
Yeah, you know that I didn't read the script before we did this.
I almost was texting you like, Dave, the fucking guy who's like he loved blimps.
Do we think that guy who was undecided in 2016 with the red shirt, who got called out on Reddit when everybody found his Reddit account where he was obsessed with pregnant women and called them sexy, sexy human submarines? Do we think that guy loves blimps?
Yeah. I mean, he loves blimpies. I'll tell you that much.
Do you think he loves blumpkins? Are blimpies and blumpkins similar?
Well, Blimpies was a submarine sandwich shop from the 90s that I think is closed. But you can definitely get a blumpkin in a Blimpies bathroom.
Do you think he likes blumpkins in blimpies while I don't even have a joke. I just want there to be a third thing.
Getting blumpkins in blimps while going to Blimpies. That's the show.
Well, no, here's the question is
new on Crackle.
Are blumpkins? No, are blimpies rural enough to where you could be a country bumpkin getting blumpkins in blimpies?
Yeah, I'm sure there's like there were like blimpies in like fucking Altoona, Pennsylvania or something like that. Which that town only came to mind because that's where they caught the fucking United Health CEO shooter. But yeah, I'm sure there was a Blimpies there.
Country bumpkins getting blimpkins in blimpies. Sounds great to me.
That we're gonna be rich. Delete this from the show. Nobody can know about this idea. Pearlman grew up near Flushing Airport, where he and his childhood friend Alan Gross would watch blimps take off and land all the time. In his autobiography, Bands, Brands, and Billions, Pearlman writes that he even used credentials from being on his school newspaper to get his very first ride on a blimp. Interestingly, his friend Alan Gross disputes this claim, saying how he was in the newspaper but let Pearlman tag along, but perhaps one that foreshadows Pearlman's underhanded nature to come. Gross claimed that he would bring Pearlman to hang out in the blimp hangar with him, where he
made the blimp guys uncomfortable. I had to tell him to stop staring and to come out and talk a little, or they wouldn't let him hang around. That's really when he started coming out of his shell, you know? Sometimes I feel like Dr. Frankenstein, who created a monster, which is so fucking funny. The idea that he's like, I feel like I've created a monster. I've made this portly, chubby boy who loves blimps into a portly, chubby man who loves young boys, and billions of dollars were made off of them collectively.
Also, he was just like the way shittier and less endearing Darius McCollum, who would like go and hang out on the subway, and all the train conductors like loved him and they let him fucking drive the train. But Lou Pearlman tried to do that, and they were just like, this guy's got a bad vibe. Get him the fuck out of my blimp.
Yeah, Darius McCollum is just like, what's up, dudes? What the fuck is going on, man? Let's fucking party on this train. We're gonna keep this shit running on time, dude. And our boy is just out here. Oh my god, fucking sounds going off like crazy on my end. Our boy's out here just being like, I love your blimp. It's like Igor.
It's just like that Ethan Slater guy, the SpongeBob guy, who's dating Ariana Grande. Everybody hates that guy because the whole scandal of, you know, him leaving his wife and getting with Ariana Grande, and everybody's like talking about that drama or whatever. And I don't care about any of that. Like, I don't give a fuck about like what strangers do. Like, I'm not invested in that. But I don't know what it is about that guy, but in every single video I've ever seen him in, I'm just like, this guy just is off-putting. I don't know what it is, but everything he says, I'm just like, like he just has like a perpetually bad vibe.
Yeah, I agree, but also so does Ariana Grande.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. Especially now, like all those interviews with her where she's like talking to the interviewer and she's like, "Oh, you're just the light of the day." This is like the hardest thing to watch. This is so hard to watch.
She's like, she gives weird like Bond or Batman villain energy. Like,
she does. And she's like that all the time. And she didn't used to be like that. She used to pretend like she was black, basically. She would do like a weird faux black accent. But now she's just like a weird Bond villain, like you just said. And she did. I saw a clip of her on that like actor on actor show thing where she was with, I can't remember who she was with, but she was even acting like that in that. And it's like, that's supposed to be like a more of an intimate like conversation. And she's still just like, oh, I like that. Like, it's so fucking weird.
It's like weaponized sincerity where she's like got this persona she's constructed for herself that like is caring and, you know, is emotionally vulnerable with her quote unquote fans. And like, yeah, I don't know, man. It's not for me. I'm still out here just repping Carly Rae Jepsen, man. Unproblematic queen. Carly Rae, nobody's out here being like, why is Carly Rae Jepsen going viral for being like a weirdo in a press junket and crying when someone says congratulations, you've made a movie? Because Carly Rae doesn't have to do that shit, man.
Yeah, she's got a great vibe.
Great vibe.
Vibes all the way down.
I will say, I feel like we should probably stop having asides and like really get into the story because we've already talked for like an hour. But there was a period when we worked in an office together where everybody in our department loved Ariana Grande. Like,
oh yeah,
loved Ariana Grande. And
yeah, it was like when that like Rings song or whatever it was out, and it was like she was at the time, she was like what Taylor Swift is now.
I was in the corner just being like, yeah, I don't know, this isn't really for me, but all right, have fun. And it was I could tell that it was like very us versus them, where it was the entire department of people who were so pro Ariana Grande. And if I had said one thing that was anti Ariana Grande, I would have been excommunicated from the fucking island. So I just didn't say anything. But because I wasn't interested in it, it was the same level of like staring daggers that you stared at me when I didn't want to eat cheese. When I was just like, I don't really like cheese. And we would have a guy that would bring cheese into the office, and you were like, how could you not want this cheese? It was that same level. How could you not want this Ariana Grande? I was like, I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm going to stay with my emotion over here. Call me maybe if you get some good taste. Thanks, but no thanks.
It's all about that Carly Rae. No thanks on the Ariana.
And now that she's like a full-on Bond villain, like out here being like, I'm holding space. I'm like, yeah, I'm vindicated.
That's yeah, you were on the right side of history because everybody's turned on her now. Like everybody hates her now.
Yeah, and her and Ethan Slater have the exact same energy of terrible. Like, yeah, I'm not into it. I'm so not fucking into it.
You two freaks deserve each other.
No shit. SpongeBob and the fucking Glenda over in the corner, man.
The two friends parted ways for a bit as Gross went to Syracuse College while Pearlman studied business at Queens College, even crafting a business plan for a helicopter taxi service. But his main interest remained on blimps. And in 1978, he had a chance to network with Theodor Wollenkemper, a German blimp industrialist. Dave, I know you said no more sides, but that sounds fake.
It sounds like something I would write. It sounds like something I would write in one of my books.
He met with like the foremost blimp expert, Theodore Wollenkemper? It's not real. Pearlman heard Wollenkemper would be in New York and mailed him a 2-foot-high birthday card coated with glitter and an invitation to have dinner with him. Amazingly, Wollenkemper accepted. What? I told you the blimp stuff was just gonna get funnier and funnier. Like, if some stranger mailed you a giant birthday card covered in glitter, would you go to dinner with them? Because I would file a restraining order.
What if Theodore Wollenkemper thought that it was a woman?
Oh yeah, he just thought he was going to dinner with like a blimp groupie. He's like, oh, Blumpkins at Blimpies tonight.
Blumpkins at Blimpies tonight, baby. And then he walks in the door and it's just like a portly 7-year-old and he's like, fuck.
He's like, oh, I'm getting on To Catch a Predator.
Yeah. He's like looking around for Chris Hansen. He's like, I really didn't know.
I'm crying. Pearlman picked him up in a helicopter and took him to his childhood apartment building, where his mother hosted the meal. Wollenkemper was charmed by Pearlman and invited him to train with him back in Germany. Pearlman returned to the United States in 1980 and founded Airship Enterprises Limited. He got his hands on a relatively cheap blimp and, taking a cue from Goodyear, wanted businesses to pay him to put their names on said blimp. He got a deal with Jordache Jeans to put their name on the blimp, which would be adorned with gold paint on the outside. It sounds flashy in theory, but after spending several days in the sun, the gold paint turned brown and made the blimp look, according to Gross, like a giant turd. With the extra weight added by the gold, as well as not taking it through nearly as many practice runs as Pearlman was required by law, the blimp crashed in New Jersey after only going a couple hundred yards. Reportedly, the blimp was probably only worth somewhere in the 5-figure range. However, Pearlman had insured the blimp for millions. Pearlman and his insurer winded up in court, and it would take 7 years for a New York jury to award Pearlman $2.5 million in damages. Did you ever in a million years think that when we were going to do an episode about the guy who created NSYNC, that there was just going to be an extended section about how he just like bought blimps?
Dude, Blimp Daddy.
Because I sure
Daddy,
didn't.
dude.
I sure didn't.
He's fucking out here. He's got the bling bling from his blimp.
Like, becoming a boy band manager was like his second act. He had a whole life as just a blimp flyer.
As a blimpist, yeah. Fucking F. Scott Fitzgerald was wrong. There are second acts in American life, and they begin and end with blimps.
Yeah. But before the payout, Pearlman was in a bit of a rut. Fortunately, he fit right at home in the go-go 1980s, the era of Reaganomics and greed is good ethos. Pearlman got back into aviation through a new company, Airship International Limited. His plan this time was to take the company public from the start, and he managed to raise $3 million in a public offering in 1985. With those funds, he purchased a 13-year-old blimp from Wollenkemper and secured a deal with McDonald's to advertise the fast food giant for most of the year. Now that he had shareholders in a massive contract, Pearlman could live the high life. He purchased a Rolls-Royce and bought a penthouse apartment on 5th Avenue. In 1989, he got a 6,000 square foot vacation home in Orlando, and by 1991, he would relocate all of Airship International to Florida. He acquired more blimps, which he leased out to the likes of Gulf Oil, Metropolitan Life, and SeaWorld. And Pearlman expanded into other aviation-related endeavors with his newest private company, Transcontinental Airlines. This was an aircraft leasing business that Pearlman co-owned with Wollenkemper. Basically, Transcon Air acted as a middleman between organizations that actually owned aircraft and people who wanted to lease them out. Reportedly, Pearlman was known to just kind of say how he owned the aircraft rather than leasing them. At one point, Transcon Air operated several dozen aircraft with annual revenue of up to $78 million. And the company got some high-profile clients, with some of the big names renting planes from Pearlman, including Paul McCartney, Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Phil Collins. And the client that would change everything for the trajectory of Pearlman's life would be New Kids on the Block. In Pearlman's own words,
"One day, in late 1989, I came across a name that I didn't know. I thought it was a joke. New Kids on the Block? Who is this? With New Kids on the Block, I was wondering how they could afford one of our planes. I learned that they sold $200 million in record sales and $800 million in touring and merchandising. I said, I'm in the wrong business. So I ended up trying to put together a group in the States, in Orlando."
Pearlman's interest in aviation was already starting to fade. Some have attributed this to a somewhat early midlife crisis after Pearlman's mother died in 1988 and one of his blimps was destroyed in a San Antonio windstorm the following year. In 1992, he put out a casting call in the Orlando Sentinel looking for teenage boys to fill out a new boy band. Imagine doing that today. Like imagine a grown man posting like it's still already creepy when it's like a big company that like puts out a casting call for young boys or whatever. Like that's still creepy, but like imagine you're just a dude and you're just like, I'm looking for some teenage boys. I have an idea of how to use them. Like you would get fucking murdered in the streets.
Yeah, dude. No more Blumpkins for you.
Nah, the Blumpkin days are over.
I think that's my favorite. Oh fuck, I can't remember the name of the artist. What's the fucking The Dog Days Are Over? What the fuck is her name?
Oh, Florence and the Machine.
You know, that's my favorite Florence and the Machine song. The Blumpkins are over. The Blump days are over.
Yeah, that was. I went to see Florence and the Machine back in 2018, I think. When she played at the Hollywood Bowl, but only because I think it was before you worked there. Or maybe it was during. I forget. We might have had the conversation.
That was when I worked there.
Yeah. But yeah, I went to see her. Not to see her. I am not interested in Florence and the Machine at all. But for some bizarre reason, Kamasi Washington, the alto saxophonist, was opening for her, and I paid money to go see just him, and we left before whenever Florence and the Machine came out. But before I left, the one song I had to stay for was "The Blumpkin Days Are Over." That was her opening song, and I had to stay.
I absolutely worked that show. I 100% worked that show.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, we probably had the conversation because I remember talking about it at the office. It was definitely whenever we were at that company.
I think it's before. That's before I started working at the office.
Yeah, it was like I brought it up for some reason when at the office. Maybe you weren't there. I don't remember. But anyway.
No, but I was working at the Bowl at that point for sure. And I remember because another one of my friends was at that show too. Zach Rohn, brilliant cartoonist and concept designer, was at that show, and he was wearing a black leather jacket with like white writing down the sleeve. And I remember walking by him and being like, oh, that's a cool jacket. And then my like eye rack focused to his face and then was like, oh, it's Zach. I don't want him to see me like this. And I walked away.
I had the same thing when I went to the show and I saw you and I went, I don't want to see him. And then I walked away. Not that I don't want you to see me like this.
You couldn't see me. You were looking out over the crowd and I was in front of you, but you just couldn't see me.
You stood in front of me the entire show. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, I forgot to send this to you. So Google Photos does a Wrapped now. Everybody's doing a fucking Wrapped because Spotify Wrapped is so popular. So I was looking at my Google Photos Wrapped and it fucking roasted you. I'm texting it to you now.
No, what?
It fucking. So there's one part of the Wrapped was your 2024 vibes, and it was like all of your vibes, like, oh, you loved going out into nature or whatever, and then this was one of the vibes that it sent me.
It just thinks that I am one of your children?
There's a one of the sections in my Google Photos Wrapped is a picture of Dave with my two sons at Comic-Con, and it says "Never growing up." I laughed out loud. I not quite as loud as Blumpkins at Blimpies Tonight, but I laughed pretty hard when I saw that.
Damn. They got me good.
Fucking roasted.
Yeah, they got me good. The best part of this, though, is that I'm like hunched down. Oh, I'm wearing the exact same shirt that I'm wearing right now in this photo. Yeah. But the best part of this is that I'm like hunched down to try and like have my head, which is such a false, like, they're fucking children. Like, it's just, but I'm like just short enough so that like if I had stood up straight, it wouldn't have made a difference, but it wouldn't have been quite as extreme, I think. But that's so funny. That's so funny.
One of the first replies came from Denise McLean, mother of AJ McLean, who would become the first member of what would become the Backstreet Boys. McLean already had music managers, Sybil Hall and Gene Tansey Williams, who collaborated with Pearlman to fill out the rest of the group. This led to a January 1993 audition where Pearlman had an open casting call held at his blimp hangar in Kissimmee, Florida. He hired Nick Carter and Howie Dorough through this audition, but found Kevin Richardson at a Disney parade where he played Aladdin and liked his voice. Kevin then recommended his cousin, Brian Littrell, in Kentucky to complete the group. They were the Backstreet Boys, getting their name from Orlando's Backstreet Flea Market. And we have a picture of Lou Pearlman here, but like, I kind of feel like everybody knows what he looks like. He's not like an obscure person, but what do we see? What are we seeing here with our boy Lou?
What is the name of not David Spade, but the other guy in Tommy Boy? Lou Pearlman looks like if Chris Farley had not died, and then just kept aging.
Yeah, he looks like Chris Farley's dad, because in Tommy Boy, his dad is played by Brian Dennehy. And I think they were kind of trying to get somebody that looked like him as an older man. And this guy looks like he's like Brian Dennehy cosplay.
Yeah, this guy, it's like Brian Dennehy, but instead of becoming obsessed with hunting Sylvester Stallone through the forests of Portland, Oregon or whatever, it's blimps. This is what interests in blimps do to you.
Blimp bow.
Yeah, blimp. Never just say no.
Yeah. First blimp.
Yeah, never blimp.
First Blumpkin.
First Blumpkin. Blimps, never even once. He also kind of has the vibe of what's the guy's name? He was big. He was a stand-up. He was big in the 90s, and he played Zach Galifianakis's mom on Blankets.
Oh, Louis Anderson.
Louis Anderson. He also kind of has like a Louis Anderson vibe to him. You know, he's kind of fair-haired,
he
blonde,
does look
soft.
like he talks like this.
Yeah, I mean, I love Louis Anderson, so let us not speak ill of the dead. But
Life
also,
with Louis, baby.
Yeah, Life with Louis. But also, I just love Louis Anderson as like a human. Like, he seems extremely broken, and I relate to that. However, he didn't try and fill that hole inside of himself with Blimpkins, Blumpkins, and Blimpies.
Just Life with Louis. He just wanted to bring some edutainment to the children of America. The group started vocal and dance lessons, with Pearlman taking care of everything behind the scenes. He effectively became a father-like figure to the boys, even giving himself the nickname Big Papa, which is weird and creepy and makes me rethink the Spappa Spicy nickname. Like, are people that as off-put by Spappa Spicy as I am by him calling himself Big Papa to these teenage boys?
I love it when you spot me, Big Spappa. Put your spans in the spare so you can true player.
Oh yeah, my favorite rap artist, the Spotorious Spee.
Yeah, exactly.
Spiggy Smalls.
Spiggy Smalls.
But he was seen as paternal and non-threatening. Richardson's son had recently passed away, and McLean largely grew up without a father. When Nick Carter joined the group, he had actually been offered a spot on the all-new Mickey Mouse Club, which seemed like the far more lucrative option at the time and would eventually help launch the careers of the likes of Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Kerry Russell, and Ryan Gosling. Future NSYNC stars Justin Timberlake and JC Chasez were also in this new Mickey Mouse pack. But Carter and his family decided to try for the Backstreet Boys, turning down the $50,000 offer. A lot of money to forgo for the struggling Carter family at the time. Which is kind of funny because it's like, oh, like they took a chance on this long shot, and it ended up being like a great decision because then he ended up being the Backstreet Boys. But in actuality, it's like, because all those people that went to the Mickey Mouse Club also just became massively successful pop stars. So it's like, actually, maybe you did make the wrong decision because you could have just done that, still became a big famous pop star, and not gotten screwed over and possibly other things by this dude.
Yeah, it's always those decisions are always so hard though. Like I've had a couple of those happen, obviously to much smaller degree because comics there's no money, but like,
oh yeah, you when you passed on the Mickey Mouse Club 2024
yeah, no, but I mean,
reboot.
you know, like Nicole and I got offered 3 different contracts for Fuck Off Squad before the one we took, and we got offered another contract from another company for a different one of our books before things were stable and we really needed the money. But also in hindsight, we made the correct call on both of those instances. And it's there. The hard part is knowing that you're in one of those crucial junctions for your career, but not knowing which is the right call. You're like, I know I'm at a crossroads and one of these is going to be real bad, but like,
life isn't a motivational biopic where you make the controversial, seemingly worse decision, but we all know that it's actually going to be the best one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard when you're presented with Blumpkins and Blimpies to pick one.
But also, I do think it was I texted that picture of you with my kids that said growing up or never growing up. I texted it to the Disney casting directors for the new Mickey Mouse Club reboot, and they offered you a spot and you turned it down. And I think that was a bad decision that you just made like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, my thought was it's a little weird. I feel like I've aged out. And they were like, I think you can pull it off. And I was like, I don't want to be like 32-year-old Tobey Maguire Spider-Man pretending to be a teenager. And they were like, I don't even think people memorize, remember that.
Oh, you're being a little gracious with saying 32.
Well, fuck you. I'm saying that he was 32 when he made the movie.
Yeah,
Spandrew.
Yeah. No, I got what you're saying. I got it.
Spandrew's just like, you look like a piece of shit. You're ugly. Let's go on.
We're both the same age. We're like literally a month apart. So I know that you're not 32.
Oh no, this wasn't about the age. This is just one of your favorite pastimes is to neg me about how I'm decomposing.
Pearlman put the Backstreet Boys under his new music label, Transcontinental Records. They got together in early 1993, and just a few short months later, they debuted on a local news station.
On the forecast, we have 5 very popular new guys here. 2 of you guys are from Orlando, right? It's called the Backstreet Boys, brand new group, and well, we're not gonna confuse you with those other kids, the other singing group, but we're not gonna do that. But anyway, which 2 of you are from Orlando? What is your name?
I'm AJ McLean.
AJ, and who are you?
Howie D.
Howie. Okay, now where are you from?
I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. My name's Brian Littrell.
Brian. Okay, and over here?
I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I'm Nick Carter.
Okay, and who are you?
I'm Kevin Richardson. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky.
The new heartthrobs, huh? What do the girls have to say about this?
Well, you like us?
Hey, let's check it out. You guys are gonna.
Man, the age gap, like I know they're only like 2 years apart or whatever, but the age gap visibly between Nick Carter and the rest of the dudes is so weird.
Nick Carter is like a tiny baby.
Like he looks like he's like 13 and they're like 20.
Yeah, and like they all look young to be like because I think whenever the Backstreet Boys got popular and also we were kids, they just seemed like adults, and I think they were, but at that point they were in like their mid to between their early and mid 20s. They're probably like 23 or something like that. But here they look really young to be like getting fucking shepherded around by these managers and pushed onto all these shows and things like that. And Nick Carter, out of all of them, he's like a tiny baby.
But yet, is the guy next to him Kevin?
Yeah, the tall guy is Kevin.
That guy looks like an adult man.
Yeah, this guy, he looks 40 at the age of 17 or whatever he is here. Yeah, this is Howie, this is AJ, this is Brian. But yeah, they're just like, they don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, this newscaster guy is like trying to crack jokes, and they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, we're just here to fucking get down. In May 1993, the Backstreet Boys performed at SeaWorld, seeing how Pearlman had an obvious in with the company. And the group soon went on the road to perform at malls and amusement parks. This is the interesting thing, like seeing this origins of this, where on the surface level, you're like, oh yeah, this guy who just like, he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and like, he became a manager and he created these bands, and then they just became like the biggest thing in the world in the 90s or whatever. But then you like read back through this and it's like, you really see how that wouldn't have been possible without all of these things that he had been like building for like years and years before, because he like used money from a business he already had. He literally held the auditions in like a fucking blimp hangar that he owned already. And he just like utilized all these relationships that he had with companies, because he like, you know, SeaWorld like rented blimps from him. So he's like, hey, like, can we like perform at your thing? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, Lou, we'll let you perform. Like you did us a solid with this blimp. And you just really see, and it's not, I'm not even saying it's a bad thing, but you just see how like all of these things that like on the surface, they seem like these things that kind of came out of nowhere, and people just kind of like on a wing and a prayer, like fucking figured it out. And you're like, no, like there's like infrastructure to this. Pearlman brought professional managers Johnny and Donna Wright to help with the group, an appropriate pick seeing as Johnny Wright formerly managed New Kids. This also meant Jean Tansy Williams was kicked out of her managerial role. The Backstreet Boys signed a deal to Jive Records, but it wasn't an immediate success, as radio stations largely ignored the first single, We've Got It Going On. It only reached number 69 on the Billboard Hot 100, but cracked the top 10 in many European countries. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody stop listening to it. Nobody else listened to this song. We gotta keep it here. So they focused on Europe and released their first album, Backstreet Boys, internationally in 1996. They worked with Swedish music producer Max Martin on the record, who would become responsible for some of the biggest pop hits of all time, including Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time, NSYNC's It's Gonna Be Me, and Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. It would take until 1997, and specifically the song Quit Playing Games With My Heart, co-written by Max Martin, upon the 1997 reissue of their self-titled debut album, that the group would finally get widespread recognition in the US. But as was Pearlman's MO, there were shady dealings under the table. This included Pearlman getting contractually designated as the sixth member of the Backstreet Boys, which meant he made just as much money as the actual boy band members made, as well as whatever money he got on top as being a manager. And when the Backstreet Boys were first formed, they were flown to New York to sign their contract. Denise McLean wanted an outside lawyer to look at the paperwork, which Pearlman absolutely forbade and essentially gave her a now or never ultimatum. Everyone signed the deal. Throughout the Backstreet Boys' rise to superstardom, Airship International went down the gutter. In 1992, the company posted a $2 million loss and a $4 million loss just 2 years later, down from a high $6 a share. But all of Pearlman's investors didn't care, seeing as how he was so much more successful in his other endeavors. Transcontinental Airlines was worth $80 million, and it had acquired a host of subsidiaries, including Transcontinental Records, Transcon Studios, the Chip and Dale's franchise, which the organization acquired in 1996, and Transcon Foods, which included a pizzeria franchise in New York called NYPD Pizza, as well as TCBY Yogurt. What a weird fucking company.
The Chippendales thing is the weirdest one to me.
It's a blimp company, and like there's a lot of corporations that like do that, where like, you know, Nintendo started out as a card company, or like probably more relevant, like, you know, something like I don't know, fucking Samsung or something like that, where like they make, or no, Kawasaki, where like they make motorcycles and they also make like musical instruments. Like there are companies that do that. But the weird thing about Transcontinental, whatever the company, the mother company is called, is that it's a blimp company that has a bunch of subsidiaries that have nothing to do with blimps. And the actual blimp business is just failing and not making any money. And then they're making a bunch of money from music management a strip club, and a pizzeria, and then a yogurt shop.
Like, I really hope that the Mystery Treehouse could one day profit from this same business model.
Where we just, with the Mystery Treehouse investigation agency, like we're globe-trotting detectives, but then that kind of dries up and we're not really doing that anymore. But we're making hand over fist cash from our music management, pizza chain, yogurt shop, and strip club. But yeah, that number one, that's very bizarre that they just bought Chippendales. And I've never known that. I've never heard like, oh yeah, do you know the guy who was like NSYNC's manager just owned that Chippendales place? And also, I feel like TCBY is like fairly regional. Like they don't exist in California. But whenever I was growing up in Roswell, that was like, and this was before frozen yogurt was like a popular thing, like in the 2010s. But whenever I was growing up, the TCBY was like the yogurt place, and we would get that like after going to a movie because the movie theater had a TCBY attached to it. But I haven't heard that name in like 15 years or something. British heir Julian Bencher, who bought into the company when he was just 22, would soon catch wise to a dark truth about Pearlman's business dealings. While most investors owned small, insignificant amounts of Trans-Con Air stock, Bencher owned a sizable 7%. In the late 1990s, Bencher wanted to disengage more from Pearlman's business and complained that he wasn't receiving dividends on his Trans-Con Air stock. Pearlman insisted Wollenkemper controlled most of the company and wasn't paying out, so Bencher flew to Germany in November of 1998 to speak with Wollenkemper directly.
Wollenkemper said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Transcontinental Airlines." He said, "What's Transcontinental Airlines got to do with me?" I said, "You own it. You own 82% of it." He starts laughing. I said, "Transcon Air? 49 airlines?" He said, "I have planes, but not this Transcon Air. Julian, this has nothing to do with me." I went cold inside. Everything I'd believed for 8 years was a lie. I didn't know what to do.
Transcontinental Airlines didn't exist. Bencher investigated further and discovered that Pearlman only actually owned 3 planes, which didn't belong to Transcon but a small charter service he had formed in 1998 called Planet Airways. Bencher continued,
"But it was always so believable. There was always a plane or a helicopter there whenever we needed it. When we flew to LA on MGM Grand Air, Lou said the jet was one of his. When he said he owned the plane, well, how could you tell he didn't?"
Bencher brought his findings to Pearlman, and they struck a settlement, which included a provision that Bencher wouldn't publicly disparage Pearlman. He didn't until years after the fact. A Vanity Fair piece interviewing Gross sees him point to the absurd lengths Pearlman went to make it seem like he owned more planes than he did.
When I mentioned Transcon Air to Alan Gross, he grins and disappears into another room, then returns with a pair of faded Polaroids. Both show a massive Transcontinental Airlines 747 landing at what appears to be New York's LaGuardia Airport. They are the same photos, I realize, that adorned the Transcon Air brochures and Pearlman had shown Bencher and other investors for years. "Look closer," Gross says, eyeing the photos. "You notice you can't see the entire airplane? You can't see the tail number? Why is that? Because that's where Lou was holding his fingers. It's a model," he guffaws. "It's one I built for him. Lou was using those fake photos all the way back in the 70s to try and raise money. Can you believe it? People thought it was all real."
So there's a picture here, and it's like it's a plane landing on an airstrip. Really doesn't look real or convincing at all to me.
Once you, I mean, frankly, I looked at it and was like, I don't know, I guess it's a plane.
I think if you weren't looking for it, you might, because and not that it's convincing, but just that, like, I think you probably just don't care enough to be like, wait a minute. But once you know, it's like pretty obvious, because like the exposure, the focus of the airplane and the airstrip don't match up.
And also the plane is landing not on an airstrip.
Yeah,
like it's landing the wrong way on. It's like if you were driving across the street as opposed to down the street.
But this is fucking crazy. This is like the equivalent of one of those magic tricks that like David Copperfield has done, where they like make like a whole airplane or an elephant disappear live. He like made people believe that he owned an airline. Like, how the fuck do you get away with that? It's a huge, massive thing that is like in one location. How do you trick people for like a decade into just thinking a whole airline exists?
So wild too. And it feels like those money-making schemes that like exploitation filmmakers used to do in like the 60s and 70s, where they would just get a movie poster made and then go to foreign markets and be like, we're gonna make a movie called like Bloodsuckers Against the G.I. Joes or whatever, and then they would get, you know, some cool painter to make a poster that's like a vampire or something, and then they would get, you know, $200,000 and then go make a movie and sell it or whatever. But he's doing it for like millions of dollars to start an airline. Like, how do you make a low budget airline where there are no planes?
It's also like that, except for if they were like, and you know, this vampire in this poster, it's a real vampire.
Yeah.
We know this guy.
This count, he's our homie.
We know this count. But yeah, it's fucking crazy. It's full kayfabe, baby. Full kayfabe.
Full kayfabe.
He had a fake airline that didn't exist. And if you're taking stock of that, if you're reading that closely, this company has existed since like the mid to late 80s, and he's been raising all this money and being very successful. And if you're reading closely, he only owned 3 airplanes, but the 3 airplanes he owned were from a charter company that he created in 1998. So prior to 1998, for like a decade, he didn't even own any airplanes at all. And he had a whole fucking business with all these investors based around the idea that he had a bunch of planes and had an airline, and this famous blimp pilot was like the main investor in the company. And it was all fake. It's fucking crazy.
I love it.
While Pearlman was defrauding investors on one end and launching the Backstreet Boys to global domination, he set about trying to replicate the success. In 1995, NSYNC was formed, with Chris Kirkpatrick being the first one introduced to Pearlman. The all-new Mickey Mouse Club ended in 1994, and Pearlman was interested in getting Justin Timberlake on board the new group. They found Joey Fatone playing the Wolfman at Universal Studios, and Timberlake's vocal coach recommended someone he knew, Lance Bass. Pearlman followed the exact same playbook he used with Backstreet Boys on NSYNC. They had trouble initially getting success in America, so he sent them over to Europe to tour and make songs with Max Martin. I Want You Back and Tearing Up My Heart became massive singles overseas. In 1998, Disney Channel aired an NSYNC concert special, which they had originally wanted to do with Backstreet Boys, but they had to back out due to Brian Luttrell needing heart surgery. The special helped launch NSYNC to be on the same plane as Backstreet Boys, and an intense rivalry formed between fans of each group, with Pearlman pulling the strings for each one. When I read that part about Brian Luttrell getting heart surgery, it punched me in the face with like a nostalgic memory, because I remember when I was a kid, when that happened, it was like a big deal. Like all of like the girls, like in my family and at my school and stuff like that, they were just like, Brian, he's gotta get a heart surgery. Oh, I hope he's okay. I remember that event when he had to get a heart surgery and everybody was freaking out about it. That just fucking punched me in the face. Reportedly, Backstreet Boys were unhappy Pearlman was behind their biggest threat and rival in the music scene. But Pearlman understood the necessity of basically manufacturing a Coke versus Pepsi-like division amongst fan bases. But Pearlman wasn't content with having just Coke and Pepsi. He wanted every soda under the sun and began cranking out a slew of other acts, including LFO, the Mountain Dew Baja Blast Zero of boy bands, and Take 5. But just as Pearlman's time as a music mogul was getting off the ground, the cracks were beginning to form. So, Dave, speaking of cracks beginning to form, you know, in order to make paper, they have to like chop down a tree, and a crack forms in the tree as they're cutting into it, and then they slice it, and there's even more cracks that are formed in it, and then they kind of mix it together into a pulp and create this thing that you can like write and transfer ink onto. And then, is there anything that does that you want to talk about?
Well, as far as paper goes, I would just like to give all of my paper to Spandrew Spice because I value him so much, and he puts in all this work on the podcast, and that's the thing I would like to promote this episode is how I think I appreciate you setting me up for the Mary Tyler Moore promo, but I'm not actually going to promo my book, Mary Tyler Moore, available now wherever books are sold. I'm going to promo my dear friend, Spaffa Spicy, the once and future Spandrew Spice, because I couldn't do this show without him. He's my best homie, my roommate here in the Mystery Treehouse. Is it weird that he only has one eye and he's wearing an eye patch? Sometimes. But you know what? That's just me inheriting ableist overtones from society that I'm working to deprogram myself with. So I would just like to have everybody give Spandrew his flowers and say how much we love him, how we couldn't imagine doing the show without him, and how I thought the show was going to end a long time ago, but Spandrew convinced me to keep going. I'm really glad that we kept going. I feel like it's gotten better. And yeah, man. I think you're the best, and I couldn't imagine doing the show without you.
You've been listening to those Ableism and You books on tape I got you?
I have been, yeah.
It sounds like you're really doing the work.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
First of all, that was kind of like Chappell Roan saying that she wasn't going to endorse Kamala Harris, but she voted for her. It's like you kind of endorsed her. Like you can't just say I'm not endorsing her, but I voted for her. That's kind of just what an endorsement is. But that aside, yeah, greatly appreciated. It's just been a joy and an honor to work on this show. It's definitely not something I ever thought I would be doing. I was just, kind of a dude who was kind of like hanging out, going through life. Never in a million years thought I would join a detective agency that also creates a podcast where we talk about weird, crazy stories. It's been super fun. Loved working on it. And, I just love life. It's just being alive is just really working out for me right now. I'm in my prime.
You're in your life era?
Yeah,
That's
I'm in my life
such a weird
era.
thing to say.
I'm in my life era, baby.
It's such a weird fucking thing to say, dude. That's so weird.
But yeah, here's to 3 more years. Here's to 20 more years of the show. We will a couple announcements. We are going to probably take a little bit of a hiatus at the beginning of the year, so we're going to finish out the rest of the year and kind of bring this season to a close. And we might take like a month or so off, and then we'll be back in 2025.
Yeah, around probably February, right? Because I think we're taking January off like we usually do, and then February we're gonna come back, right?
Yeah, we'll take off January. We'll come back the beginning of February with the new season of the show. Like I said, 20 more years, baby, 20 more years. And if you want to follow us on social media in the meantime, you can go to Facebook and search Deep Cuts Podcast. You can join our Facebook group by searching the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. We got a cool community of people there that hang out, talk about the show, share other cool stuff, make memes and things like that. You can also join our Discord server by going to bit.ly.com/deepcutsdiscord, where we talk about the show, we make memes, we play games. There's a cool little community there that hangs out and talks about a bunch of fun, random stuff as well. You can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod. You can follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse. You can get some merch from our store by going to deepcutspod.com, clicking on the shop. We got hats, we got t-shirts, we got wallets, we got baby onesies, we got fanny packs, all with cool Deep Cuts graphics on them. You can get a Deep Cuts Mystery Treehouse Investigation Agency shoulder patch that was designed by Davey Bakes himself. And you can follow me on social media at Deadboy Detective on TikTok. And now, back to the show. Act 2. You drive me crazy because you stole all my money.
You drive me crazy because you stole all my money.
I mean, it was supposed to be the Britney Spears song that's more relevant to
yeah,
this.
it totally is. Of course it is.
But yes, Fine Young Cannibals is also It's also another good You Drive Me Crazy song. And I never even realized that those two songs had the same exact title.
Yeah, me neither until right now.
In 1997, Brian Littrell of the Backstreet Boys was going over their finances and couldn't figure out why they were barely making any money despite selling millions of records and non-stop touring. He discovered that since 1993, the group collectively only made $300,000, coming out to each individual member only taking home about $12,000 each year. Littrell sued Pearlman with the rest of the band, joining the litigation the following year. During discovery, they learned that Pearlman had been secretly paying himself as the sixth member of the band. Kevin Richardson told Rolling Stone in 2000,
He totally deceived me. We're a family. And then you find out it's all about the money, it's all about the money, it's all about the money.
which also is kind of like a crazy thing because, I mean, we were kids, so I guess that makes sense. But like, I was completely unaware of this. Like, I didn't realize that this stuff happened back then when we were kids. Like, I thought this maybe these things came to light later on, like, you know, maybe 2008, 2009, because that's kind of when I started hearing about it. Was like, oh, the guy who like created the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC was like a fucking con artist, and he scammed them out of all this money and stuff like that. But this stuff happened like at the prime of their popularity, and we're gonna read about this later. But the album NSYNC put out, No Strings Attached, which was like their biggest album ever. That's like their most popular album. It was about freeing themselves from Lou Pearlman, which was just mind-blowing to me. I was completely unaware of this happening at that time. Pearlman and the Backstreet Boys eventually settled out of court. However, the band got money and its freedom from being under Pearlman's thumbs, while Pearlman received a portion of the future revenue brought in by the band. It didn't take long for the other boy bands to catch wise. LFO broke up following 2 top 10 singles, Summer Girls and Girls on TV. Take 5 also broke up in 2001 despite earning some success across Asia and Europe. You can ask my wife this, and I want you to ask her the next time you're over, and you can verify that this is true to like an extreme degree. Like she will have such a reaction to this, but you know how you get a song stuck in your head, and like, you know, you might sing it for like a couple days or whatever, or maybe like, oh, I've been singing this song all week or whatever. But let me ask you this, and this is an honest question. Is there a song or like a vocal tick that you've had stuck in your head for like a decade? Something that like consistently for literal years, you can't help but do when you're just like walking around.
Oh yeah, there's like
idling.
50 of them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And like I said, my wife will be very aware of this if you bring it up to her. But I for literal maybe 8-9 years, I can't stop doing this. I do it constantly. I say it to the kids all the time. I say it when I'm by myself, but I can't stop going Scooby-Doo-wop and Scooby Snacks. I met a fly girl and I can't relax. I do it all the time. And it's the LFO song, Girl on TV. That was their second hit single. They had 2 singles that were big hits. It was Summer Girls, you know, I like girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch. I take her if I had one wish. And then their other one was Girl on TV. I think I fell for a girl on TV. And the thing about LFO was like they were like the funky ones. Like if Backstreet Boys were like the pure heartthrob, like, you know, good boys or whatever. And then NSYNC were kind of like the feisty, kind of like bad boy ones. And then LFO were like the funky jokester ones. And they had like funky little lyrics in their songs that were like kind of like pseudo rap, where in Summer Girls, they would be, I like girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch. I take her if I had one wish, but she's been gone since the summer. Something about like Chinese food. New Kids on the Block had a bunch of hits. Chinese food makes me sick. Like they just had like weird lyrics. And in Girl on TV, there was a lyric that went Scooby-Doo-wop and Scooby Snacks. I met a fly girl and I can't relax. And I've had that in my head for 10 years. It's like a vocal tick that I do. But the biggest blow to Pearlman came when NSYNC sued him in 1999. And once again, Pearlman would bring in some money from whatever revenue the band brought in from there on out. The litigation inspired their 2000 album, No Strings Attached. Chris Kirkpatrick said of the inspiration,
"It became our battle cry. We didn't know anybody anymore. We had no ties to anything but each other and our fans."
This would only be the start of numerous other lawsuits to plague Pearlman. Gene Williams and Sybil Hall, the first managers for the Backstreet Boys, sued, claiming they were denied a portion of their earnings from their work with the band. An original member of the Backstreet Boys before dropping out to pursue a solo career also sued Pearlman at this time due to fraudulent business activities. Also, damn, Phoenix Stone?
Yeah, that is a network PI from the 1980s name right there.
That's a solid name. Honestly, all the dudes in Backstreet Boys and NSYNC just kind of have like funky names. Like Brian Littrell, I was saying Littrell, but he said Littrell in that video, which is like, that doesn't roll off the tongue very well. And then, Chris Kirkpatrick, the listener won't know, but I had to redo saying that like 10 times to just recording it just now because I can't fucking pronounce it. JC Chazé, that one sounds pretty good. JC Chazé is a solid stage name.
Lance Bass, though, Lance Bass is like a middle school, like Lance Bass is the magician that comes for your junior high, like, oh, all of the teachers are sick, it's the end of the year, we got to do something. All right, we got an assembly, everybody go to the auditorium, we've got Lance Bass, magician to the stars today.
Yeah, that's not a strong name. And then I think what Kevin Richardson is like, that's just kind of like it's a dude's name. It's just a dude's name. They all just kind of got funky names. And then the one dude who actually did not stay in the band and didn't receive the success, his name was fucking Phoenix Stone.
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to be successful just off of the strength of my name. Fuck you guys.
Yeah, he knew he was destined for greatness because his name was Phoenix Stone. None of the other acts Pearlman signed ever achieved the same success as Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, although Aaron Carter under his label did very well. The youngest Carter brother also sued Pearlman in 2002, accusing him and Transcontinental of cheating him out of several $100,000 as well as racketeering. This suit was also settled out of court and racked up $15 million in legal fees with his lawyer Cheney Mason, which is all. Cheney Mason is, that dude lived up to his fucking calling. Like Phoenix Stone, he flopped, but Cheney Mason, he became what he was meant to be, or she. It doesn't actually say if it was a woman or a man, but either way, Cheney Mason, that is a lawyer.
Cheney Mason's a lawyer or some sort of PR representative that works with movie stars.
Yeah, either or. Mason then sued Pearlman for failing to pay his bills, with Pearlman insisting he didn't have the funds. But he really shouldn't have been hurting financially, as part of his settlements meant he still got royalties from the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, allowing him to own numerous properties across the country as well as at least 2 Rolls Royces. But in the early 2000s, the boy band craze was drying up. Pearlman would need some other revenue sources to maintain his lavish lifestyle. He co-produced the reality series Making the Band, which is how he got O-Town under his banner. He also wanted to make moves in Hollywood with his new distribution company, Transcontinental Pictures. And also, and this is another thing that's mind-blowing, all this stuff happened, he was outed as a fucking con artist that he kayfabed his whole business empire and got sued by these bands he created for cheating them out of money. And then after that created O-Town. O-Town, again, I thought this all came out later in 2008 or something like that. But that band was created after he was outed as a fucking con artist. They were just hell yeah, let's work with this dude who has 40 bands suing him for fraud.
We love the idea of being famous by any means necessary. We don't give a shit if this guy's gonna fuck us.
'Cause I want it all or nothing at all. Even if we have to get fucking scammed by some dude, I just want to be famous 'cause I want it all. He co-wrote and produced the 2000 film Long Shot. The movie's about a pair of brothers who get roped into an insider trading scheme where they're hired to seduce a widow to get whatever information they can out of her before an upcoming business transaction. A fraudulent business scheme? Looks like Pearlman wrote what he knew. He was on some Ann Perry shit. He's like, I'm gonna just write about myself getting away with the crimes that I got caught for. The plot doesn't really matter though, as the movie's mostly an excuse to cram it full of the musical acts Pearlman worked with, who were presumably still on good terms with him when they filmed their parts. Longshot has appearances from NSYNC, Britney Spears, LFO, O-Town, Take 5, C-Note, and Innocence. It also includes a cameo from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in one of his first ever film appearances. Just based on the timeline, because it has O-Town in it, and O-Town was created after all these lawsuits. So like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, or no, it's just NSYNC. NSYNC was in this movie after they sued him for ripping them off.
Do you think that was like an apology gift where he was just like, as like a breakup fuck, like, one last time, boys, want to be in my movie? And they were like, no, wait, actually, yes?
Yeah, I guess. That's very bizarre. I would never talk to this person again.
Yeah, me too.
But this is the trailer for Longshot.
When the odds are against you.
Every great player misses shots. You got the talent. All you need is the confidence.
When the opportunities pass you.
First you blow the shot and the game. Now look at what young Alex has done.
And when you don't know what to do.
Topanga! Topanga!
Jenna Fisher? No, that's Jenna Fisher is the girl from The Office. What is her name? Jenna Fishnell? Fishnell, something like that?
Everything's gonna be fine.
You know their tunes. You know their faces.
Oh, there are people standing over there. Work.
Now see them in action.
The craziest thing I've ever seen. Turn it up, watch.
It's got Zachary Ty Bryan in it from Home Improvement.
What is this music? I don't know what the problem is, but they've got to get in sync.
Take 5, LFO, and O-Town. In a story about beating the odds. Starring Hunter Kylo, Danielle Fishel.
Danielle Fishel. There we go.
Introducing Tony DeCamillis and Joey Sculthorpe with Antonio Sabato Jr. and Paul Sorvino.
The thing I want to know about this movie, which, okay, one, the fact that there is a boy band supergroup team up movie, I'm shocked that I didn't know this, because this is the type of weird...
I've never fucking heard of this before.
This is the type of weird, obscure bullshit that I love.
Also, it's like Cliff Twemlow quality. Like it's like a Cliff Twemlow quality of movie, like that production level. But it just happens to have like the biggest musician pop stars in the world in it. It's like cognitive dissonance. It's like, here's this shitty movie that was shot for $1 and it has the biggest stars in the world in it.
But the fact that Paul Sorvino is the villain is so funny to me. I don't know if you know this, but like Paul Sorvino was like a madman.
I thought you were gonna say he was like your godfather, and he like went to your bris or something.
He was like mentally like just like an insane person, and like there's all these stories of people like going to him and being like, "Hey, we want you to play this mobster," and he's like, "Why would you fucking ask me to do that? I look like a fucking mobster to you?" And they're like, "Well, you know, Paul, we just really feel like you've got like, you know, the presence. What's my fucking presence? Like a fucking criminal? You think I'm a fucking criminal?" Like he was like extremely angry about everything all the time and would like pick fights with people.
He was just Joe Pesci from
you think I'm funny, haha.
Yeah,
it's totally that vibe. But I just want to think about him interacting with the fucking boy band guys of just like, you fucking little fucking singing? You fucking sing little songs? You want me to be in this fucking sing-song movie?
What do you fucking mean, bye? What do you fucking think I can't understand it the first time you say it? You think you have to say it to me 3 times? You think you can just say bye to me and I don't understand that and you have to say it 2 more times after that?
What do you mean it's gonna be May? I know it's gonna be May. I know what fucking month it is.
You think I'm a fucking idiot? I don't know what fucking month it is right now? You think I don't know that it's the end of fucking April? What do you mean? What do you mean hit me, baby, one more time? You think I've already hit you? You think I've already hit you once? You think I'm some kind of fucking abusive monster that I would fucking hit a teenage girl? You think I've already done that one time and I need to now do it a second time?
Fucking Paul Sorvino's just in there being like, you guys You guys fucking sued this guy? You sued this guy? Now you're fucking in his movie? What's fucking wrong with you? What are you fucking doing?
What do you mean Scooby-Doo Wop and Scooby Snacks?
and then fucking he like looks over and Pearlman's over in the corner and he's just like, that motherfucker gets Blumpkins. I know it. He gets Blumpkins in the fucking Blimpies. I know it.
We're Blumpkins and Blimpies brothers. You know I'm getting those Blumpkins and the Blimpies.
He looks to the other side of the set and Lance Bass is like flirting with a dude and someone's like, you know that guy's gay, right? And Paul Sorvino's like, what the fuck do you mean he's gay? He's Lance Bass. He's a heartthrob. Women love him. He loves women. He's just talking to that guy.
He just becomes obsessed with trying to prove that Lance Bass isn't gay. He just like can't handle that existentially.
Lance was always my favorite of the fucking NSYNC boys. I fucking loved that guy.
I almost started doing the narrative in the fucking New York accent voice. As a surprise to absolutely no one, the movie flopped hard, bringing in $2 million off of a $20 million budget. Pearlman continued trying to find the next big music hit, like with a European boy band called US5. He also appeared on VH1 Inside Out Hulk Hogan's Stage Dad, a prototype version of the eventual reality series Hogan Knows Best, where Hulk Hogan's daughter tries to launch a music career, and you'll never guess who she gets as a producer. I'm gonna play this just because we have not seen any video of Lou Pearlman this whole time.
Thought of, and it just was so much more personal and it meant so much more. I want this to be the single.
2 days later, Lou Pearlman visits the studio to hear the song Brooks wrote.
Well. Okay, this is the deal. We recorded a song, then we're gonna play you what we recorded. All right, I believe. Nice stuff. Wait until you hear it. I believe in this voice, this choice. I believe in positive.
It just fucking sucks. And then they're just like sitting there like forced vibing to it. Everybody's just like, we have to pretend like we like this.
Dude, force vibing is
You like it? Oh, cool.
Sound good stuff.
Totally unplugged.
Did you hear the final mix that we did?
He's like, it sounded really good. I gotta pay for my fucking legal fees. I love it.
I've never loved anything more in my entire life. Maybe we can squeeze 2 nickels out of this.
But Pearlman had reached the zenith of his success and was on a downward trajectory. And if you'll recall, he had effectively defrauded hundreds of investors who expected payment at some point. Starting in 2003, he began taking out bank loans, pledging every asset he had, including all of his properties, the 3 airplanes actually under his name, and even his boy band royalties, just to get some cash. It's the existential threat of every Ponzi scheme, just needing money so no one finds out about your super illegal activities. But even through getting all these loans, the banks never caught on that Transcon Air, easily the biggest asset he supposedly owned, just didn't exist. The Ponzi scheme started to unravel in 2004 with the death of 72-year-old Joseph Chow, a lucrative investor for many of Pearlman's enterprises. His family never loved how much the patriarch had given Pearlman over the years, and when he died, they needed funds to pay all the estate taxes. So someone reached out to Pearlman about getting the money back, in which Pearlman told them that the investments Chow had made were only worth about 10 cents on the dollar. Pearlman offered a repayment plan and filed a lawsuit against the family right as they were hiring their own lawyer, who soon stumbled upon a massive break in the case. The centerpiece of Pearlman's litigation was that Joseph Chow had given him a forbearance letter in which Chow effectively said that all of his loans to Pearlman would be forgiven if Pearlman didn't feel like repaying them. Brooks knew this didn't make sense because no one would give up $14 million in loans like that. Brooks later explained,
"What really got me, late one night, poring over all these documents, was that Joseph Chow's signature looked familiar. And that's when I started going through the notes my client had signed. Then I saw it. I grabbed one of the old letters with his signature, held it up to the light, and compared it to the forbearance letter. The signatures were identical, absolutely identical. You lay them one on top of each other, it's one signature. At that point, I realized I was looking at a forgery."
This is so funny. You just like, there's just like a handwritten note, and it's just like, "Dear legal peoples, please don't charge any monies to Lou Pearlman, the handsome, cool guy that I really think is the best. Signed, Joseph Chow. it's like the guy, the Chai, was it Chai Industries? The guy, and it was like, he's like, here, this letter. And it was like, dear legal peoples, these guys in Thailand can have Ultraman. Signed, Ultraman guy.
EJ Subaraya gave me the Ultraman. Thank you.
The discovery process also meant that Brooks needed to look more closely at Pearlman's finances, which involved getting in touch with his accounting firm, Cohen & Siegel, which Pearlman had worked with since at least 1990. Brooks sent over a process server to their reported headquarters, and according to Brooks,
the process server calls back and tells me there's no accounting firm at that address, just a secretarial service.
According to a woman who worked at the secretarial service, she was paid to get any calls related to Pearlman's business ventures and simply direct them to Pearlman personally. Brooks did find a fairly new website for a Cohen & Siegel accounting firm, but it was based in Germany and had no contact information. It just plain didn't exist. Pearlman named the accounting firm Cohen & Siegel as a reference to two infamous gangsters, Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel. As these investigations were taking place, some of the investors received letters from Harry Milner, who's noted as the CFO of Transcontinental Airlines, which chalked all of this up as a big misunderstanding and that they would receive their money shortly. No one knew who Harry Milner was at first, only to realize he was a former business associate of Pearlman's, but they hadn't worked together since 1989. Milner actually died in 2003, but Pearlman was forging his signature on these documents to make it look like it was coming from someone else. Dear investor people, please don't be mad at the cool, nice, handsome Lou Pearlman that I think is the coolest dude, because everything's okay. Signed, Harry Milner. The Chow's legal team had all the evidence they needed to charge Pearlman with significant fraud. It took a while for rumors of what was going on to trickle to Pearlman's other investors. This included Frankie Vasquez Jr., who had known Pearlman since childhood. He had given Pearlman roughly $100,000 over the years, and around the time the lawsuit was taking shape, he reached out to Pearlman to get it back. According to a friend of Vasquez's,
Lou told him he was on his own. The money was gone. After all the years Frankie had devoted to Lou, he turned his back on him. Frankie, I knew, felt totally betrayed.
In November of 2006, Vasquez was found inside his car in the garage with the motor running. He had died in an apparent suicide from carbon monoxide poisoning. Let me be clear, especially after we get to like some of the other later possible allegations. I'm not siding with this guy at all. I don't condone anything that Lou Pearlman did. But up to this point, you're almost kind of like, like this is scum. He's a scumbag, and this is all bad, and I don't recommend anybody do this. But he like ripped off a bunch of rich people. Like, kind of, who cares? And like, you know, while he was scamming the talent, they all eventually like found they all eventually found independence and massive success and fame free of Lou Pearlman, and it all worked out well for them. So I'm not to say that any of this is like okay, but it's almost like it almost feels a little low stakes, where it's like, he was a scumbag, but really the only people that like were negatively impacted were a bunch of like rich investor people. All the talent kind of like were okay in the end, so we can kind of be lighthearted and jokey about this, right? And then this is the point where it takes that dark turn, and it's like, he fucking caused somebody to kill themselves. Like, Jesus Christ. Some dark shit.
Super dark.
The end of the line was coming quickly for Pearlman. He sold everything he had and stopped paying the banks he had taken the loans out of. Then, the bank started suing him. Attorney Jerry McHale was put in charge of liquidating Pearlman's assets. McHale visited Transcon's offices where Pearlman hadn't been found in weeks, and there were no employees left, as he had fired everyone. In February of 2007, McHale raided Pearlman's mansion and gained access to his office's computers, where the full scale of the grift came to light. In the early 1990s, Pearlman offered investors what sounded like a great opportunity: Transcon Air's federally insured employee stock ownership plan. This gave investors an employee investment savings account, or EISA. He said that this would give investors an annual return of about 8%, and the best part is that he claimed it was all backed up by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the American International Group, and Lloyd's of London. Of course, none of that was true. The investments were not backed up by the FDIC, the AIG, or Lloyd's of London. In fact, Lloyd's found out about what Pearlman was claiming in 1999 and filed a complaint with the Security and Exchange Commission, which didn't seem to go anywhere. Pearlman just seemed to assure all of his investors that everything was on the up and up, especially since he lived so luxuriously, and reports suggest investors got to meet the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, so surely he must be successful, right? Pearlman would even show investors a fake FDIC letter in his office, as well as an unrelated AIG policy that had nothing to do with his business. But the biggest con of all was with EISA. There's no such thing as a federally insured vehicle called an EISA. There is something called an Employee Retirement Investment Saving Account, or ERISA, so it seems that Pearlman was just banking on confusing people with the similar names. Through this, Pearlman ran a classic Ponzi scheme. He paid old investors with the money that came in from the new ones. According to McHale's findings, there was $317 million in missing money by 2007 that was supposed to be in those EISA accounts, as well as $156 million gone that Pearlman had gotten from the banks. While McHale was liquidating Pearlman's assets in the media, Pearlman himself was completely on the lam. He hadn't been seen in weeks, and there were reports he was going around to various countries with no one really being able to pin him down. That was until 32-year-old German programmer Thorsten Iborg checked into the Westin Nusa Dua resort in Bali, Indonesia. After a couple days, Iborg noticed a pale, overweight white guy who looked an awful lot like Lou Pearlman, who he had seen on the news earlier. He just did like a particularly savage "this guy looks like" with the cops. He's just like, yeah, this guy looks like Brian Dennehy if he's just about to die in the next week. This guy looks like just a pedophile who hasn't had a fix in a couple weeks. He's just like roasting him to the cops.
This guy looks like homicidal Ponzi scheme running Life with Louie.
They're just like, we know exactly who it is. We'll be right there.
They all get in an airplane to fly to Indonesia, but when they get in the airplane, then a little like police siren thing comes out of the top, and it starts going, and then they fly through the air.
Iborg got photos of Pearlman and sent them to reporter Helen Huntley, who passed them along to the FBI. They dispatched agents from the American Embassy in Jakarta and arrested Pearlman, extraditing him back to the United States. Helen Huntley is the sequel to Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But it's just me riffing off of Helen Hunt's early career work in Trancers.
It's a mashup of Trancers and Mad About You.
Mad About You Trancers. Paul Reiser's character gets replaced by the shark guy from Trancers 4.
The FBI discovered that Pearlman had registered at the resort under the name, and swear to God, this isn't a joke, A. Incognito Johnson.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, dude. Fuck yeah.
And here's a picture of A. Incognito Johnson in chains getting ushered into jail.
It's giving Paul Walter Hauser if you dialed up the pout to like 11.
Yeah. He's imagining all the worst things you can imagine whenever you are that guy and you're about to go to jail. Pearlman was indicted by a federal grand jury on June 27th of 2007 and charged with money laundering, conspiracy, and filing false bankruptcy. See, this is like what I was talking about, where like this is where I was hearing about this, was in like 2007, 2008. So I thought that like all of this came to light then, and up until that point, he was just like a celebrated person that nobody had a problem with. I didn't know that like this all happened in the late 90s, but then like he just paid off everybody to just not talk shit about him, and then he just like coasted on for another decade. Pearlman pled guilty. On May 21st, 2008, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the promise that he could reduce his prison time by 1 month for every $1 million he assisted a bankruptcy trustee recover. Many of those Pearlman defrauded attended the sentencing and tried valiantly to get put at the top of the list of people, trying to be the first to get paid back something. And Pearlman's history of fraud could have ended a lot sooner. Around 2004, Florida Assistant State Attorney General Jackie Dowd was looking into deceptive practices with Pearlman's model scouting company called Transcontinental Talent. The state had received over 2,000 consumer complaints over being misled by the company's claims. Dowd was prepared to file a consumer fraud case, which likely would have brought everything to light. The state of Florida shut it down, and Dowd was forced to resign. The Attorney General's office, headed at the time by Christopher Christ, cleared the company of wrongdoing months later. In 2007, a lawsuit would be filed against Christ, who was now Florida governor, of receiving inappropriate campaign contributions, including $11,000, the use of sport skyboxes, and travel on private jets from Pearlman when the state was investigating him. The lawsuit against Christ was later thrown out. While running a Ponzi scheme would be enough for one dirtbag, allegations of sexual misconduct also began trickling out around 2007 and 2008 about the way Pearlman conducted himself around all the young boys he put into his stable. Pearlman was never charged with anything related to sexual misconduct, and nothing has ever been confirmed, but there were certainly plenty of stories of him trying to take advantage of all the singers that were around him in the 90s. Steve Mooney, an aspiring singer who worked as Pearlman's assistant for 2 years, told Vanity Fair in 2007,
"Some guys joked about it. I remember one singer asking me, 'Have you let Lou blow you yet?' I would absolutely say the guy was a sexual predator. All the talent knew what Lou's game was. If they say no, they're lying to you."
Mooney lived in Pearlman's home for those years he worked for him, and by his account, he would frequently see young male singers sheepishly coming out of Pearlman's room late at night. Pearlman's estate was effectively a pseudo-Neverland ranch, according to accounts, complete with Star Wars memorabilia and a game room, everything one would need to appeal to prepubescent boys. Mooney described his own incident. Pearlman would regularly give him massages, and one night, after an intense argument, Mooney yelled about what it would take for him to finally get into a band.
"I'll never forget this as long as I live. He leaned back in his chair, in his white terry cloth robe and white underwear, spread his legs, and then he said, and these were his exact words, 'You're a smart boy. Figure it out.'"
Similar sentiments were shared by LFO singer Rich Cronin on a 2009 interview with Howard Stern, where he said,
"He wanted to bang everyone. He wanted to bang everyone there. He's disgusting. He needed you to sing a little bit, but he really wanted you to be good looking."
Vanity Fair also spoke with Phoenix Stone, who alleged that Pearlman was also inappropriate with Backstreet Boys member Nick Carter. Stone spoke about the reported falling out between the Carters and Pearlman.
"With Nick, I gotta tell you, this was not something Nick was comfortable talking about. What happened? Well, I just think that he finally, Lou was definitely inappropriate with him, and he just felt that he didn't want anything to do with that anymore. There was a big blow up at that point. From what Jane says, yes, there was a big blow up and they confronted him."
After the Vanity Fair piece came out, Carter spoke to MTV about the allegations in a rather cryptic way.
"There's a lot of people who maybe were involved in our stuff in the past who want to take an opportunity, maybe because they're a little bitter, maybe because of where they are right now, and they tend to throw us under the bus, you know what I mean? Because of where we are right now. I mean, I'm not naming anybody, but any attack on any one of us in the group is an attack on the entire group."
It's perhaps worth noting that while Nick's mother, Jane Carter, didn't talk about anything specific to Vanity Fair, she did note,
"I tried to expose him for what he was years ago. I hope you expose him, because the financial scandal is the least of his injustices."
Of course, not everyone who worked with Pearlman had such lurid stories. Lance Bass of NSYNC told the Orlando Sentinel in 2007,
"I never saw anything like that with Lou, even at 16. I knew there was something fishy about him, but he never made us feel uncomfortable. I wasn't surprised after we left that stories like that would come out about him hitting on younger guys."
LFO member Brad Fischetti even referred to Pearlman as a friend upon the news of his 2007 arrest. Pearlman suffered a stroke in prison in 2010, but his spirits remained high. In 2014, The Hollywood Reporter caught up with Pearlman in prison, where he spent a good amount of time shit-talking Bernie Madoff for how his Ponzi scheme blew up in his face, insisting that Madoff had no way to pay his victims back while he definitely intended to do so.
"He was just a scamster. I don't think it was right what he did, but I had my way to make it all right. I just didn't have my chance to do it."
That's so funny. He's just like, "Oh yeah, that Bernie Madoff guy, that guy was a criminal. I was totally gonna pay everyone back. You just didn't let me." What was Pearlman's big plan to pay off all of his investors? If only the prison allowed him to conduct business behind bars, he insisted he could have found the next big boy band and make a ton of money all over again. Pearlman also flatly denied the molestation accusations within the Vanity Fair article.
The accusations that came out in that article, none of it was substantiated. Nobody who I've made a success has ever accused me of anything negative like that. The Vanity Fair piece interviewed only people that had a grudge.
Pearlman's release date wasn't until 2019, but even when the article came out, he was hopeful he could get back out there and have another shot of music success after he was released from prison. But that would never come to pass. Lou Pearlman died of cardiac arrest in Miami, Florida on August 19, 2016. Following his death, nobody immediately contacted the coroner to claim his body. Some people even reached out to his cousin, Art Garfunkel, but he also wanted nothing to do with claiming it. Pearlman ended up being buried in his family's New York cemetery plot on August 29th. Only 5 people showed up to his funeral, and there are no headstones or markings over the spot Pearlman is buried. Backstreet Boys and NSYNC remain pop culture institutions. The Backstreet Boys are still touring and putting out albums, and to date have sold over 130 million albums worldwide, making them one of the biggest acts in music history. NSYNC has sold over 70 million albums. It made Justin Timberlake a household name and one of the biggest pop stars of the 21st century after venturing out for a solo career. And the group reunited in 2023 to record the song Better Place for the Trolls Band Together soundtrack.
And definitely not to describe or distract everyone from Britney Spears' damning revelations about their relationship and how weird he was and what a piece of shit he is interpersonally and how he cheats on his wife currently. It was definitely just like, we feel like getting the band back together. It was not a calculated PR move at all.
Yeah, there's like the Hot Ones episode with NSYNC, and like there's something going on in Justin Timberlake's eyes. They're just dead. They're just fucking dead in that video, in that interview. Pearlman undoubtedly influenced pop music for generations to come, but it was all built on the back of deception. The money Pearlman paid to get those boy bands off the ground came from defrauding investors with the longest running Ponzi scheme in American history. And people trusted him because he exuded the aesthetic of wealth. He was surrounded by some of the biggest names in the world at the time, so people just handed over their money if it meant a chance to be in the same room as the Backstreet Boys eventually. In a way, Pearlman never changed. Whether it was introducing himself as Art Garfunkel's cousin or being the founder of the biggest boy band in the world, Pearlman understood that who you know is just as important, if not more important, than what you know, or how much money you actually have in the bank. People lost their life savings. At least one person took their own life because of Pearlman's fraud. But hey, Bye 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 is definitely a bop. Did you think that story was going to involve Blimps, Chippendales, and fucking
grievous sexual assault of minors? No, I didn't.
I mean, I knew that part.
You know, it's funny. I watched that documentary that NSYNC produced about him. I think it was during the heyday of YouTube Red. So like, I don't know, 2019, 18, 2020, somewhere in there. And I watched that documentary and I remembered the broad strokes of what was in this episode. But frankly, there's so much more to that story than the NSYNC portion of it. And I feel like Lance Bass, he missed his calling as a producer because he should have said, let's focus more on the Blimps. Who gives a shit about the fucking boy band stuff? Like, you use the boy bands to get people in the door, and then you just shit talk those Blimps, baby.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, that was objectively the funnest part of the story. I was almost more fascinated by just the idea that he was just this weird blimp mogul than I was about any of the boy band stuff. And I just love that he was just a weird little freak that just loved blimps. And then like the boy band management thing just kind of was like almost like him just like defaulting to something else whenever his blimp dreams didn't work out.
If he had been born in a different era, he wouldn't have been a serial Ponzi scheme, sexually frustrated assaulter, asshole. He just would have been a guy on TikTok being like, I fucking love blimps.
Yeah, he would have been like the TikTok blimp guy.
Yeah, he would have been able to live his truth, but instead he lived his entire life frustrated and, cuckolded by everyone around him and like emotionally stunted and a criminal. He just needed to live his truest blimp life.
Yeah, 100%. Well, what do you feel about, because I mean, obviously it's fairly cut and dry. Like, he was just a piece of shit. And
yeah, it's not even, but to me the emotional core of this though isn't him. It's more the Faustian bargain that all these people have to make or perceive that they have to make.
That was exactly what I was going to ask you, because it's like, yeah, that's all fucked up, but you gotta think in your mind, like, at some point Justin Timberlake is just like, fucking thank God though, like, and I was gonna ask you what you think about that, like, what that Faustian deal that's exactly what I was gonna say.
I think it's really hard to parse and judge someone else's decisions in those key moments, because like we've talked about previously in this episode, it's really hard to know what is the right and wrong way to go. You know, it's so interesting. I was so like I was out with some friends last couple weeks ago, and I was introduced to some new people, and one of the people was this young woman who was trying to get to know me, and she said something to the effect of like, what is important to you? Like she was kind of doing a bit, but she also was like genuinely trying to ask me. And she was like, so what are the three things that are most important to you? And I was like caught off guard a little bit, because we were just like at dinner. Like we were just like standing there waiting to get food at this restaurant. And she was like, so what are the three most important things to you? And I was like, I don't know this person at all. Should I give like a joke answer? Should I give a serious answer? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here.
Blumpkins, Blimpies, and Blimps.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's what I should have said. But what I really said, you know, was like, look, and it was a group of us, right? So it was a little weird, because it was like, I've just met these people. I don't know them, and they're like ostensibly interviewing me. And she goes, what are the three most important things to you? And I, in a split second, was just like, all right, I'm just going to be honest. Like, I'm just going to say. And I was like, well, I have to be honest and say that, you know, I think the thing that's the hardest to do is to live a life where a sense of moral rectitude trumps financial reward. And I attempt to do that. That's one of the things I try and live my life by. And we were in the middle of a restaurant, bro. You could have heard a pin drop. She did not want that answer. She did not want that answer. And then she literally looked at me and she was like, what does that mean? And I was like, okay. So then I just tried to explain what moral rectitude is, and how when you're working in creative industries, obviously sometimes you're presented with these forks in the road, like we've been discussing today on this episode, and how sometimes your moral compass and the deal or the opportunity in front of you are divergent, and how do you square that circle? Didn't go over particularly well. So then I panicked and was like, and then also Dracula. I don't know. I like Dracula too.
Yeah, for some reason, I was gonna say the same joke, but for some reason in my mind it was Terminator.
Right. Yeah. But I mean that genuinely though. Like, I don't regret giving that answer, because that's true. Like, I think that is really hard as a creative person, or as anyone. I don't even think it's siloed off into people who are pursuing a creative path. I think there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And I also think that we're constantly being asked to compromise our moral compass, to condone political acts we don't believe in, to condone financial situations we don't believe in, to operate in a corrupt system of however you deem, you know, whatever the parameters of that are, and the way that we all choose.
This is a little different though, because it's not like they were being asked to sell their souls necessarily. Like, it wasn't like Lou Pearlman was like, hey, you got to sign with me and you got to fucking murder a kitten or whatever.
But I think dude, no way. Are you kidding me? No way. No way. You're saying this motherfucker shows up and goes, all right, I know you guys are really poor, but you're going to leave all of your family members behind. You're going to come live with me in this weird mansion out in the middle of nowhere. You're going to rehearse 6 days a week. And also you're going to walk around shirtless all the time. And we're going to figure it out. We're going to make you guys famous. But like, I need to see you bitches sweat. Like, there's not something weird there. You know that there is. You don't quite know what you're getting yourself into, probably. But there's no way.
I think there is now in retrospect, because we've just become a lot more socially conscious of that. But I think that was like, that kind of stuff was like pretty common and normalized in the industry back then, where people were just like, yeah, like Hollywood people are just weirdos and they're just eccentric, and you just like, that's what you got to do.
But that's a perfect example, right? This is exactly what I'm talking about, is like, that is a normalization of, I'm willing to cross this line in order to get what I want, which is to move up to the next rung, right?
Yeah, but 100%. Either way, it's odd, and it's a sacrifice. But I just meant like, it's less of a like, oh, am I willing to do evil? And it's more of like, am I willing to endure? Not necessarily you're not thinking of it as evil, but you're willing to endure like a drastic lifestyle change, something that kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, or maybe just definitely makes you feel uncomfortable. And then just kind of like, it's more of an endurance than it is like, I have to do awful things.
Well, maybe, but maybe it's also like, is the money that I'm going to bring into this guy going to further ensnare other young people who maybe aren't in as wise as I am, or, you know what I mean? And also just that we talked about earlier in the episode, the one fork in the road of like, should you go and be on Mickey Mouse Club, or should you sign with this weirdo blimp enthusiast, live in his house and hope he makes you famous, right? Like even that.
Which, saying it out loud, shouldn't have happened. There's no reason.
Exactly.
There's no reason why that would have happened, and yet somehow it did.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's, that's the root emotional core of the discussion that's interesting to me is like, and obviously Justin Timberlake is the one who's won the lottery on top of winning the lottery, and you never hear him like, he's too Ryan Reynolds. He's too polished. He plays the character of Justin Timberlake in public now. He's not JT from the block. But like when he was drunk after having a really bad phone call with his, wife who's like, you cheated on me again? I would love to be able to talk to him and be like, was this worth it? Is this what you thought it was going to be? Would you do this again?
Hey. Yes, yes, yes.
It's gonna be me.
He responds in only NSYNC lyrics. He's like Bumblebee from the Michael Bay Transformers movies.
Yeah, I mean, those are my final thoughts. What about you? Do you have final thoughts on this bad boy?
Yeah, I mean, it was just essentially that. It's just like, it's he's a fucked up dude and he did some horrible things, but it's just really fascinating to, it's that like the butterfly effect of like all these people that just had to endure these, these kind of shitty years, and then they kind of came out the other end of it. Some of them not so lucky, and some of them very, very lucky. And I had the same thing where I was just wondering, you'd love to just pick someone's mind and really, without the Ryan Reynolds PR training of whatever their bullshit, sanitized version of it is, just really just talk to them one-on-one as a real person and just be like, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're glad that it happened in the end? Do you feel like, I had to like, shoulder it through all that bullshit and I came out the other end and I'm just glad it happened? Or would you go back and change it and be like, I don't care about the fame. I would go back and like preserve my childhood innocence. It's just, you'd be very fascinated. You'd be very interested in talking to all of those people and really getting one by one, their thoughts on how they feel about that in retrospect.
Lance Bass, if you want to be a guest on the show, hit us up, broski. And on that note, I'm Dave Baker.
And I'm Spandrew Spice.
This has been Deep Cuts. If you'd like to find me online, you can do so at heydavebaker.com, where you can find my book, Mary Tyler Moorhawk, or Spandrew Spice, We Love You Forever and We Never Want You to Go Anywhere .org. Spandrew, where can people find you on the internet?
You can't find me on the internet because I never have and I never will be on the internet. But if you want to pay your respects to the dear, beloved Papa Pricey, you can get his book, Deadbolt AI Private Eye, by going to his website, dapricewrites.com, picking that up. It's a comic about a robot in the future that solves crimes. You can follow us on social media by going to Facebook and searching Deep Cuts Podcast. You can join the Facebook group, Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group, where we talk about the show. We make memes. We do other cool stuff. It's a cool little community of people there. You can join our Discord server, bit.ly.com/deepcutsdiscord, where we also talk about the show, make memes, play games, so on and so forth. You can follow us on Instagram at Deep Cuts Pod. You can follow us on, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Deep Cuts Podcast. You can follow us on TikTok at Mystery Treehouse. And you can follow me on TikTok at Deadboy Detective. Deep Cuts is a production by Boy Genius Media. If you'd like to find this show and others like it, please visit boygeniusmedia.com or deepcutspod.com.
If you want to join in on post-episode discussions, please join the Deep Cuts Podcast Facebook group. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional video content.
The incidental music for this episode was created by D. Catalano, whose music can be found at wekeepoddhours.bandcamp.com. This episode of Deep Cuts was guest written by Mike Bedard. If you'd be interested in writing an episode of Deep Cuts, you can email Andrew at boygeniusmedia.com. All right. There's another one in the books. Well, okay.